Howdy everybody, I thought we'd do a fun video where I imbue you with the knowledge that I know about sport bikes. And a common format that we see across the internet is the Iceberg meme. We're gonna start off at the top with stuff that pretty much all normies kind of know, common everyday knowledge, work our way down until you are given the secret texts and tomes of sport bike lore and knowledge. Let's begin and show you and elucidate you to all the wonderful world and things of sport bikes. Let's start off at our top layer. This is for the Moto-curious, the non-riders out there, people who are kind of interested in bikes, kind of getting started, looking on YouTube a little bit. The first one that I see here is leader bikes, and people will say leader, like the leader of a group and the leader in followers. This was, I think, just like, I'm gonna be honest, like very low IQ people just like didn't understand that 999 cc's rounded up to 1,000 and 1,000 is equal to liters. And honestly, I think it's more of an American thing because we don't really use, metric systems, base 10 systems. So I think that's how that ended up being like, people write leader bikes. And I do think that there was a copy pasta from a long time ago from I think Reddit where someone called them leaders and it just stuck and it's super funny. Next would be the CB750. This is the ancient motorcycle from Honda from way back in 1969 that was the original super bike. That's the framework for all motorcycles that you see for sport bikes, inline 4, electric start, high-powered, precision engineering. This was the framework for all future sport bikes. So CB750, you gotta know, is the first one to do it. All right, this one's just super common. Loud pipe saves lives. You've probably seen this everywhere. It's been debated to death. People often say that if you have really loud pipes that people are going to hear you before they see you and it keeps you safer. It's demonstrably untrue. It's not proven by physics. And if you want to be actually safe, don't ride too fast and wear bright colors. That's going to help you a lot more. So I'm sure you've seen this one quoted, "My friend said I should start on a 600. Your friend is probably a trailer park Gixxer owner and you should not listen to them. Any average meth head or crack dealer is going to tell you that you can start on a 600. This is low IQ, bottom barrel, trashy behavior. Do not start on a 600. Start the right way. Get a normal motorcycle, ride safely, ride correctly. Do not listen to your buddies telling you to start on a 600. Don't fall victim to groupthink." Crotch rocket is a term that you're going to see thrown around quite a bit too. This is usually by people who have no idea about anything about motorcycles. They just see any sort of sport bike. It could be a naked bike, it could be a super sport, it could be a hyper sport, it could be a ZX14, and there's like all those crotch rockets go super fast. So that's terminology I've seen thrown around a lot. You'll also see people say, "Oh, this guy I knew died in a crash way back when." It feels like every gas station interaction I have is somebody telling me to be safe on those things. I knew a guy that died. Okay, we all know people that died. Whatever. So a bike killed a guy, a bike didn't kill the guy. Doesn't matter to me. So the term baby squid is one that I kind of popularized here on the channel. A squid was commonly a term that people use to describe riders who are a little bit reckless, a little bit unsafe, kind of dates back to the 80s and 90s, into the 2000s, kind of Gixxer riders riding with just t-shirts and just a helmet on. Some people think it's a acronym, but I just think it's a terminology that emanated from somewhere else. And then baby squid implies a tiny one, so I often say that someone who's starting to ride a motorcycle is a baby squid. And we've kind of reclaimed the word here on Yami Noob. I think it's just to, say that someone who enjoys having fun with their motorcycle and isn't a super safety nerd. And that's actually the title of our next layer down the iceberg. All right, so Hayabusas have their own lore. I could probably make an iceberg video just about Hayabusas, but for the kind of surface level about it, you got to know that Hayabusas were commonly owned in the early 2000s. I don't know why, by like basketball players, football guys, very large athletic men who wanted to customize them into like stretched chromed monstrosities. They kind of stand as a testament and totem of Y2K culture, and they've permeated over the last 20 years in that way. And it does hold the record at that time for the fastest production bike. I think it clocked over 200 miles per hour when it was unrestricted. So it's common knowledge that red motorcycles, specifically Ducatis, do tend to get pulled over more. This is actually proven by science and traffic studies where red cars and red motorcycles and red vehicles just get pulled over more because I don't know if you've seen, our world is a giant gray nightmare. All cars and bikes and everything are just white, black, or gray. And so if you have something red or lime green or flashy, you're going to draw more attention to yourself. Chicken strips. No, it's not what your mom's cooking up when you come back home from your work day. It's actually the unused bit of tire on your rear tire on a motorcycle. And people often say that you have that little strip when you're too chicken to lean the bike over. And it's actually ridiculous because if you're riding on street and you have a little bit of a strip, it means you have margin to use on the tire. And it means you're not using it, leaning it all the way over, which you probably shouldn't be on the street. It's also very easy to get rid of your chicken strips if you want. You just go to a parking lot and just lean the bike over in like circles. You'll get rid of them within 30 minutes. But I do have to say, if you're riding on track, you shouldn't have any chicken strips because you're supposed to be riding fast. Another super common one we see all the time, it's, memes of people being like, why won't my bike run? And it's their bike trying to start up and it's making the classic sound of a dead battery. Literally every time somebody has a bike that doesn't run, it's always the battery. Just change your battery. I promise it will fix 90% of your problems. So Ducati's snobbery is pretty self-explanatory. Ducatis are seen as like the Ferrari of motorcycles. They're, kind of quirky and weird, and for a long time they did things in a very peculiar way. Trellis frames, Desmo engines, all this weird stuff. And so people who own Ducatis, because they tend to be more expensive, more exclusive, are a little bit snobby about it. So a classic one you see online are guys who own a clapped out K5 Gixxer and they'll tell you, it's faster than a supercar, as if the dude that owns a McLaren cares that your $3,000 bike is faster than a supercar. But people do love to say that, and I gotta say, it is kind of true. Most leader bikes are faster than 99.9% of things on the road. Another common one we see is that slip-on exhausts add 5 horsepower. People love to say that they're just gonna put a little end cap on their bike and it's gonna magically add 5 horsepower. It's not true, it's a bit silly. If you want actual meaningful power from your bike, you have to tune the ECU, flash the ECU, get a full system exhaust, do all the stuff that's not really worth it. And last for this line item, we do have cagers. People love to say that people who drive cars are cagers because they're stuck inside their cage, and those who ride motorcycles have broken beyond the matrix and can see the entire universe for what it is. It's a bit cringe. I don't really like calling car drivers cagers. It just feels kind of dumb. Our next category is our motorcycle enjoyer, and the first one is my 600 goes 186 miles per hour. Now this one is a bit ridiculous because I say this and I thought that everyone knew the joke, and then I get comments being like, 600 don't go 186 miles per hour. And the joke is that there were so many forum posts from like the early 2000s where like R6 guys and like Gixxer guys were saying that, I guess with a long enough runway, the right sprockets, the right tune, that their bike could hit indicated 186. And everybody knows that with like 120 horsepower, you're not hitting 186 miles per hour unless your bike is properly race tuned and it's on like the banks of the Daytona Speedway. Right, now we can move into advanced Hayabusa lore, and the first one is that the name Hayabusa comes from the peregrine falcon that eats blackbirds, and the Hayabusa was designed to compete against the Honda Super Blackbird, and that's how the name was developed. And it was also designed to be intentionally grotesque by the designer. So next time you see a Busa and you think, who would design such an ugly thing? It's supposed to be monstrously, masculinely stupid. That's the whole point of a Busa. You have the entire subculture of Gixxer Squids. I don't know why the GSXR just became this motorcycle that attracted a very specific type of rider. You know the one, the mohawk on the helmet, no gear, just a helmet on, flip-flops. This has become a very archetypal meme in our community, I would say, over the last 30 years probably, and has endured the test of time. I don't ever really see Gixxer riders riding normally. They pretty much always have, a kind of a Gixxer Squid spirit about them. And, it is Pride Month, so congratulations, Gixxer riders. The Ducati 916 is also thought of as the most beautiful motorcycle ever made. That's kind of a meme you see bandied around online a lot of the times because it was designed by the genius Massimo Tamburini, and it's just got these beautiful lines, beautiful shape. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think the 916 is a very beautiful motorcycle. It looks great, but most people tend to think it's the most beautiful bike ever made. You got the classic phrase, old riders, bold riders, but then you don't have any old, bold riders. And I've often said this one myself before. I think it does ring true a little bit. It's a fun little aphorism if you want to throw out at your next group ride. Just say like, hey man, ride your own ride. It kind of falls into those things of, like just trying to ride safe and, keep your bike shiny side up. So if you've ever wondered why Kawasaki's are green, well, it's because way back in the 70s, Kawasaki intentionally defied the common wisdom at the time that green was an unlucky color, and so they painted their bike green and then went racing with them, and gave us some of the most iconic liveries and colorways. All right, the next rung on the iceberg, it's the comment section sage. Now, you might see this comment that says, I can outbrake ABS. A lot of riders, for some reason, I think it started because ABS was introduced like way later than in cars, and then motorcycle riders have a vastly outsized perception of their own skill sets, and they'll say things like, I don't need ABS, I can outbrake it, man. And that's just completely ridiculous. Especially considering that most riders have never even been on a racetrack, and then they'll say, I can outbrake ABS. Shut up. You might also see something that says, oh, the K5 Gixxer is faster than a Panigale on track, and I personally think this was the greatest bit of disservice to the motorcycle community was when Zach and Ari from Revzilla and formerly Motorcyclist Magazine made a video where they showed that their Panigale that they had at the time could not beat the lap times of a K5 Gixxer. Honestly, this did so much bad PR for the motorcycle community in general, because what it did was it had everybody with the clapped out K5 Gixxer thinking that it was better than a Panigale. And it's not at all, it's so frustrating that that's what happened. But yeah, if you ever see anybody talking about a K5 Gixxer being better than a Panigale, that's why. It dates back to a video that I think was posted like 6 years ago at this point. You might also see that in the conversation of the best sounding motorcycle ever, the Honda CBX seems to come up quite a bit. The CBX was a motorcycle that features 6 cylinders way back in the 70s and could rev out to well over 10,000 RPM. And it does sound pretty damn wicked, but I do think some modern engines do sound a little bit better. Another bit of behind-the-scenes knowledge is that the Kawasaki H2 was actually built in collaboration with the Kawasaki Heavy Industries Aerospace Technology Division. So if you don't know, Kawasaki doesn't just make motorcycles. This is a company that dates back to World War II era aeroplanes and aerospace sort of technologies. And so, a fun meme that people love to throw around is that the H2 was actually designed with like aerospace-grade stuff, which, hey, maybe true, maybe not. You'll see also people say, just run, bro. Cops have no chase policies. Don't run from the police. Please don't do that. This is terrible advice. Just pull over. If you have registration, insurance, and you have a good license, just pull over. You'll probably just get a warning. Don't do anything stupid. You might also see people say, if you're not crashing, you're not pushing hard enough. Perhaps that is true on track, but on road, don't crash your bike. You can live a good life without crashing it. You also have people who are inline 4 elitists, and this has come up more in the last couple of 5, 7, 10 years because inline 4s are kind of going the way of the dinosaur. There's few of them being made now. Parallel twins and 3 cylinders have kind of taken over, and so now it's kind of like, oh, inline 4 is the greatest engine configuration ever made. Everyone needs to get one, even though it's been proven that the market doesn't really want them as much anymore. All right, the next rung on the iceberg, we're getting further deeper down. It's forum moderators. So the Honda NR750 oval pistons mimicking a V8. Now this one is a bit complicated, a little technical, but stick with me here. So in the 90s, Honda made an NR750. That was the motorcycle that had a V4 configuration, but it had oval pistons. And the reason they did that was to literally fit more valves inside of each cylinder combustion chamber. And so each cylinder had 8 valves, which is completely absurd for a motorcycle. So it had 32 valves inside of this engine, and the reason they did that was to mimic a V8. Did that net any sort of godlike, meaningful performance? Not really. It kind of ended up as an interesting kind of design oddity from the times that, Honda's cocaine budget was skyrocketing in the 80s and 90s. They don't do anything like that now, but we are going to get that V3 boosted motorcycle, so who knows? Following up on that, there's also the thought that the 916 from Ducati, as previously mentioned, the most beautiful motorcycle of all time, was designed based off of the Honda NR750. So this is kind of deep lore here, but for the 80s and 90s, Honda and Ducati were duking it out in World Superbike, and it kind of like one would copy one would copy the other, and that's just racing and competition. You see what the other guy's doing, you start doing it, change it a little bit. It's like when you copy someone's homework, but you just change it a little bit so you don't look like you're cheating. And really, racing is cheating if you think about it. So there is the bit of lore that the S1000 is actually just a reverse-engineered K5 Gixxer. And again, this comes back to this insanity that the Gixxer has of being this there is no greater leader bike ever than the K5 Gixxer. They took the bike and they turned it into the S1000. It's the pinnacle of superbikes, blah, blah, blah. It defeated the Panigale. Do you see, the K5 Gixxer has just become this ridiculous meme in motorcycling. But it is true that BMW did take a K5 Gixxer and basically just reverse-engineered it to make the S1000 in its first iteration in 2009. So the Dunlop family curse is a tragic bit of sport bike lore that explains how members of the Dunlop family, who were very famous in road racing, did end up dying doing what they loved to do. Joey, Robert, and William all actually passed away road racing. Now, this next bit of lore is one that I've mentioned a lot here on the channel because I don't have a super high opinion of the S1000RR. It's that they only won in World Superbike because of Toprak. So Toprak Razgatlioglu is an incredibly talented alien-level rider in World Superbike who did crazy things on the Yamaha R1 versus Jonathan Rea. He then moved to BMW and won 2 titles for them, which was pretty nuts. Another bit of lore, and probably one of the reasons that Japanese bikes have this kind of mythical quality in motorcycling, is that the original Fireblade wasn't more powerful, it was just simply much lighter than the competition. And it kind of started that whole meme of like, oh, it handles like a 600 but has the power of a 1000, because the original Fireblade was kind of like that, and it kind of reinvented the modern sport bike. All right, our final depth here. This one is the Abyss of Autism. So we have the S1000 tablecloth advertisement. So this one's from way back in the day. BMW did this advertisement, the original S1000, where they had the bike lined up with a string or a rope attached to it, and they had, all the tablecloth on a table and like all this glassware, and the bike takes off and it pulls the tablecloth off of it and everything stays in place. They actually tested that on Mythbusters later after the advertisement using Jamie's Buell, which is kind of a fun call out too, and I don't think they could actually get it done, so it was a little bit of movie magic. So you've seen your Jixer Bras, your crazy riders on Instagram, but the original Squid who did it first was the Ghost Rider. And the original Ghost Rider DVDs were sort of this like mythical bit of lore that got passed around from rider group to rider group. It reminds me of like, guys selling mixtapes out of the back of their trunks of the car. But the Ghost Rider DVDs really set the tone of like, all right, this is what it looks like when you squid at the highest level possible. This guy was running from the cops, doing 200-mile-per-hour wheelies, just doing things that just seemed completely impossible to the modern average rider of the time. And really, you look back at it now, and it looks even more insane. But I think this was only possible because there was no mass surveillance state, social media, everybody recording everything all the time, and maybe those were better days. So this is probably your uncle's favorite thing to say. It's that the VFR has gear-driven cams. This is a bit of lore that people love to talk about, and we're going to get a little technical here, but I promise it's worth it. So most motorcycle engines drive the cams through a chain. There's a chain that is connecting, typically a dual overhead cam engine. There's the 2 cams at the top and a chain that drives down to the bottom. The VFR actually has gear-driven cams. So instead of a chain, it's a bunch of gears that drive down to the bottom. And VFR enjoyers, they love to pull that out because it's sort of a bit of Honda's engineering and, it's like, oh, look how excellent this motorcycle is. There's no chain. It's so amazing. Really, it's just kind of a fun party trick. It really doesn't add much to the bike other than it being kind of cool when you take the cover off. So people often say that motorcycles are getting so expensive, you can't get anything nowadays, all these bikes are too crazy expensive, but really, bikes aren't more expensive relative to inflation. And in fact, bikes have gotten better and cheaper than they used to be for the same price you'd pay relative to inflation. Unfortunately, what has happened, as many people know, is that wages didn't go up at all during that whole time. So now it feels like it's more expensive because you're not making more money. That's really what happened. So don't blame the bikes, blame the economy. Right, so this is one that only truly a elder autist would know about. It's that the BMW chief designer, David Robb, who is responsible for both the S1000 and the Scarver and the C1 scooter, he's actually the brother of Hoobastank vocalist Doug Robb. That's probably a weird Thanksgiving that they have, don't you think? All right, and some final bits of autism-level motorcycle sport bike knowledge. Now, it's that Moto 3 bikes are actually cornering faster than MotoGP bikes on most racetracks. So next time someone talks about your little tiny beginner bike, tell them I'm actually cornering faster than your big bike. Another bit is that motorcycles actually, when you get on the power with them, the wheelbase actually shrinks. And the reason for that is because when you crack on the throttle, the chain pulls both sprockets closer together. And then when you relax that, it actually gets a little longer. So when you're cornering, the bike's wheelbase is longer than when you're upright and on the gas. It's kind of weird. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this deep Iceberg sport bike knowledge breakdown. I hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun. If you have any other bits of lore you want to add in the comments, we can use this as a piece of reference that we can look back on, sort of like the Library of Alexandria. You can come back and look at this video and think through all the bits of sport bike knowledge. I hope you have fun scrolling through the Elder Tomes. Thank you for watching this video. I will catch you on the next one.